All right, welcome guys and girls. Today I have a song breakdown for you from the album Testament by the artist Ensbello, which is the artist name that I go by. It's basically a Latin word or two words that means ins being we or us and bello being like the beautiful, we the beautiful. And so it's really a hint at just the humanity and the beauty in which we all are created and share. And so basically that is the name that I've been releasing music under. And so I'm going to give you a walkthrough of one of the songs that is here on the album. It's called On the Way, Not in the Way. Let me give you a little sample before we jump into the project. Music under, and so I'm going to give you a walkthrough. So you've got a bit of like train sounds and stuff, and then it kind of builds up to here. I've left the links in the description below to the album, both on Apple Music and Spotify, but want to jump into basically the session and break it down how I made it. And it's one of the things that you'll notice here is that there's not like a ton going on. I think earlier on when I was beginning my journey as a producer, I would just layer and layer and layer a ton of sounds together to try and make up for the fact that I think I was just lacking taste in the right sounds and the right frequencies to kind of cover the whole spectrum, making sure that, you know, low, mids, highs are all covered well. And what's happening dynamically between all of them and the movement and stuff is really organic and fun. And so one thing I am happy about now, and I think this has shown a bit of my maturity and growth, is how I don't have a million things going on. I don't have, 6 different bass stems. I've got 2 and very simple percussion. And if we jump into my mix window, you'll notice that I've both mixed and mastered here in Logic, and there's not a ton happening. Like there's a few things that are hidden, which we can dive into. And so if we listen to the piano sound here, which is just a bounce in place. Bit of automated volume. You're getting a bit of reverb, you're getting a bit of fun from it, but basically if I hit H, I'm able to unhide this layer, and I'm just going to make it active again so that we're able to listen to the actual MIDI that was played, and I can show you the plugin. So basically I'm using Spitfire's Originals Mrs. Mills piano, which I've made the altogether preset my starting point, and then I've tweaked some of the stuff in here. But what you'll notice is I've basically got an ARP on it, an arpeggiator. So if we listen to it from here, without the ARP, it's right, just hitting the chords. Throw the arpeggiator on. And the only effect that I'm really using here is from the Baby Audio plugin. And it does a modulation between, on this side, echoes or delay, and on this side, only reverb. But as you can see, I've got the, basically this is your dry wet signal. I'm only using the reverb on this side, but it's very long decay, very slow. If I turn off the reverb, this is what it sounds like. Very dry, right? Turn it on. So I'm almost using it as like a bit of like a pad sound as opposed to having two sounds. I'm just creating one source that I find really interesting, endlessly sort of interesting, in that I could listen to it on loop for a really long time. And I think that's, to me, a sign of good sound, is one that it's just easy to listen to for an extended period of time. But basically I've taken that and I've bounced it in place, which has gone ahead and left us with this little bip bounce in place, right? Cool. So that's to me basically a signature sound to this track, to this song, and we don't hear it till about minute 27 in, minus those empty bars on the left. So it's really what I think carries the song into its bigger moments. So if we listen, so what you'll hear on the top here is an arcade sample, and these are the vocal chops if we solo them. And that's from the Distant Voices line in Arcade, made by Output, which is an amazing plugin. And as far as effects on that, we've basically got some saturation. And if we listen to this without saturation, without the reverb I've added, it sounds like this. Still has some reverb from Arcade, shorter delay. Bring down our saturation, just really warms it up, makes it come alive. And then a reverb. And I'm using FabFilter's Pro R2, mixed at 10, so just subtle. Hearing that though, as it plays out. And then for the strings, I've got a group here, and you'll notice I've got a fair amount of processing happening on the strings. And if we just listen to them together, right? And so most of my processing, or in this case, all of my processing, is happening on what is my strings bus. So I've basically created a track stack. If you are familiar with those, it's basically just busing, these three channels into this folder. And so it's nice for me to be able to just close it out and, easily move around my project this way. But what's the makeup of this is, first of all, I have this augmented beautiful swell, which is made by Arturia, and it sounds like this. And then I have the Appassionata violins by Spitfire Audio, which are some beautiful high-end, high frequency range sort of sample strings library, which sounds like this. You'll notice the dynamics are automated and moving. And that's coming from the modulator. So basically in Logic, I've set up a modulation just to add a bit of movement to the strings. You can see here, helps bring them alive, which is basically automating this wheel. Then I've got another Spitfire library, which is the Heirloom library, and it's the strings long. Also, you can see it's got some automation running, and it sounds like this. And as I mentioned, we have the strings sort of subgroup have all of the processing on it, which I'm running Soothe 2. And I've got the orchestral nose job as my starting point. And basically, if I play it and I delta it, these are the frequencies it's pulling out. So sort of that shrilly, harsh stuff. If I bypass, enabled. So it's just helping clean up the fact that, you know, they're samples and they need some help. And then that's going into Realm, which is a reverb by Native Instruments, and that sounds like this. Without. With. See if I pause how nice that holds. So that's the reverb that I'm throwing. And then I think part of the secret sauce in nice strings is what is the Kramer tape plugin, and that's made by Waves. If I disable that, it sounds like this. If I turn it on, gives it that nice analog feel. And then we're going into here, a nice channel strip made by Plugin Alliance, and it's got about everything. You can see I'm doing a little bit of a high pass, some compression, very minor, and then mostly EQ. So if we play that same part and I take the EQ out, EQ in, just adding a bit of brightness, pulling out some of the harsh frequencies. And then the last thing here is the Magma BB Tubes, which is a saturation plugin, which I'm just running through as the last stage. Just a little bit of saturation without. With. So that's the strings, and you can see there's no automation really happening with the volume. It's just basically when they come in and when they play. Then for our mids, I have this broken down, and basically what I've done is I've taken the bounce in place of this guy. And what that is it's this guy actually. If I open it, it's the Olafur Arnold Stratus made by Spitfire, playing. So that's quite a fun sound. And I've just muted that here because I've bounced in place at the beginning just to get that sound exactly how I want it. And then later on, I've got it playing again for sort of the bigger part of the song. And then that little lead that you heard is the Abbey Road's Wondrous Flutes. And it's just playing. right? And the only thing I have on that is a little bit of a saturation by Softtube. All right. You will notice that on my mids group, the subgroup here, I do have a little bit of EQ from FabFilter's Pro Q3, and basically that's doing a high pass at 77, adding a little bit of presence at 58, slight notch at 8K, and then a little bit of a reduction at 10, or at 210, yeah. Which, if I play later in this is just a mids group. If I bypass, enable, just cleaning it up subtly. Okay, so carrying on, we have these Abbey Roads brass horns. We're into 1176. I've got the UAD version, into a bit of reverb. You can hear what that sounds like. And then I've got here this piano soundy thing. Which is called Up the Hill Lead. The EQ. Into Brower Motion. The Brower Motion's helping with a bit of the stereo left-right panning and imaging, just to keep it kind of alive and dynamic. And so basically this was the piano part, as I mentioned, that I played in, but I've got some just funky sounds happening. Cool. And then as we go down the road, we introduce this sound, which is a vocalize. Made by Heaviosity. It's kind of a vocal choiry sound. With that Stratus Oliver Arnold's, right? So all together to mid sound like. Bring in the strings. Cool. Then for bass, what we've got going on here is I've basically got another track stack. So anything that's played here is coming through both the stare down sub, which is an arcade plugin, and it sounds like this. Just getting a lot of our low end. And then I've got the Mini V by Arturia with some processing. It sounds like this. Nice, hey? I like that sound a lot. Put them together and it sounds like this. So you'll notice I do have some processing here with Ozone's bass warmer. I've got some saturation from Magma Tubes again. I've got some EQ happening from the Pro Q3. And on that Mini V, I have Heaviosity's Punish plugin, which is adding saturation and its secret sauce, sort of bit of this Brainwork subsynth, which is adding low end, the extra bit of hit. And then I've got a one knob by Waves Pumper, which basically I've got the rate set to 1 bar. So you can choose different time at 1 bar. So basically it's pumping up and down just a little bit to help kind of add some dynamics and movement to the bass. And then underneath, you'll notice I have some percussion. But if we want to listen to the bass and percussion together, I'll just show you percussion first. This is a clock tick. And basically, you can hear if you're wearing headphones or have speakers that left, right. If I turn that off, it's just straight up down the middle. Turn it on. This is Pan Man by Sound Toys. Doing a left, right at 1 bar speed with a bit of saturation and then a bit of reverb from the Magma Springs. Right, and you'll notice that there's automation happening, so it's dropping out at one point. So very simple percussion here, but that with the bass sounds like this. In here I've got some arcade drums. So it's basically a taped sample that's going to be played from arcade. And that sounds like this. I've got a bit crusher on it. If I turn that off, it's making it sound super destroyed. And then the secret here is this is just a little EQ by FabFilter, and I'm doing a high pass and low pass to really limit the amount of frequencies coming through. So with it on, with it off, back on. Okay, so that's percussion. And then down here a little further, you'll hear in that loop, it's just got a bit of EQ on it. Without the tic-tacs. Then down here we've really got our sound effects. So I've got this train sample, which I've bounced in place with just a bit of, if we jump back to what the original was, I am using, let's see, yep, bit of Portal, bit of Realm. So just basically some delay sounds and some reverb to create that sound, and I've bounced it in place, and then here we hear it again. And that's part of sort of our ramp up sound. So if we put them together, we have the steam tractor sound effect, and then a whistle reversed. We got a reverse whistle. It almost sounds like a breath or wind, which I liked because together it does this. Nice transition, and then the main part of what's happening with that is also in the mids. So together, these guys. And so you'll hear a lot of that key signature sound is coming from this. That vocal. And then, so yeah, if we open it all up, we basically have all of this going. I can go ahead and hide our piano layer again, since we have the bounce in place. And then what's happening down here in the stereo out is I've got Ozone, which is basically my mastering plugin, and it's going through some EQ, impact, imager, clarity. So if I start playing it, stabilizer, dynamic EQ, maximizer. Maximizer is huge. It's really the loudness. then I've got that going into this UID Pultec EQ, but I'm really using it for the tone that it gives. So if I play this part here with it off, turn it in, off, it's very subtle warmth. In certain parts, I'm sure you can hear it more. But then my main compressor here, obviously Ozone's doing a lot of the mastering, is coming from this Brainworks Master Desk by Plugin Alliance. And this is kind of similar to like a Shadow Hills or something, but it's just helping with all of that compression, bit of stereo image, mono maker. Without it, with it here, without, with, you hear it's really helping with that loudness and that control, bringing it all together, kind of tying it in. This is probably one of my simplest mastering chains or stereo outs. And then again, we're going into here just FabFilter Pro L2, which is my favorite limiter. You can see that. Got our out set to -0.1. So you'll notice that most of my gain reduction is actually happening here because I have this basically working to limit it as a compressor. And then I've just got this as a final stage to catch anything that that Brainworks Master Desk doesn't catch. But this is doing most of the heavy lifting and the sort of limiting. And so I could actually, you know, basically turn off my limiter and be okay. But depending on how fast some of the transients are and some of the hits, this guy doesn't catch everything. So this is sort of just my final stage to make sure that we never hit 0. And that's essentially what's going on. If I turn off what this master chain is doing, let me go ahead and give you a preview. This is what this part sounds like. Ozone. So this part again. So as you'll notice, this master chain is really where the magic's coming from and pulling the sound together, having Ozone do all of this incredibly heavy lifting. Let me just turn off Ozone, which is the loudness, EQ, stereo image, all that stuff. It sounds like this without it. With it on. So that's basically the song. And from beginning to end, we've only got a handful of things going on, which is something I really appreciate about it. There's a bit of sound effect, there's a bit of percussion, there's a bit of bass, there's, you know, the mids, the strings, that top melody. It's all here. It seems to be working together. There's a little bit of volume automation that I've done to kind of give the track some movement and dynamics. But other than that, I am quite happy with the fact that this is such a simple track. And hopefully this breakdown has been helpful. I know I'm always learning a ton of stuff from just watching other people work and create and produce music. And so I hope that this is helpful. And if there's questions that you have in the future as to certain sounds or breakdowns on how I'm creating something, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. I'm just getting into the whole live streaming and sort of sharing my workflow and what I've been doing, but feel free to check out my music in Ensbello over on Apple Music or Spotify. Links are in the description. And until next time, cheers.